On October 14, 2018, speedrunner Demo Jameson made a breakthrough discovery that would change the Celeste speedrun forever. It was discovered that, by dashing downward and quickly redirecting to a horizontal direction instead, the player is able to retain a crouch state while dashing horizontally. By reducing the player's vertical hitbox, players are now able to perform a pixel-perfect dash through walls of spikes. This is most notable in the demo dash skip in Celestial Resort, which bypasses multiple screens and saves roughly 10 seconds in an any percent speedrun. Similar applications of the demo dash were quickly found as well, such as earlier in Resort and in Summit's B-side, among others. Now, dashing through spikes is cool and all, but what if demo dashing could be used for more? What if dashing through spikes is but a fraction of their overall benefit to speedrunning? You may be surprised to hear that this is indeed the case. When demo dashing was first discovered, it was thought that the tech would never be viable to use outside of the highest reward scenarios, due to the difficulty in performing them. As mentioned earlier, to input the demo dash, players would need to dash downward and then quickly release down and press the direction that they actually want to go. If the player does not do this redirection fast enough, they will either dash down or down diagonal, which will almost always result in death, since there are spikes nearby. And since these dashes through spikes are pixel-perfect skips, they didn't only require a precise dash redirect, but also very precise timing. For a while, players pretty much exclusively attempted the demo dash when doing the skip in Celestial Resort. Because the amount of time save offered by this one skip is so large, runners were guaranteed to save time, even if it took them a few tries to get it right. But other applications were seldom used in speedruns, as they were considered too risky to attempt, and offered too little reward. It would later be discovered that, by abusing the game's input priority system, players can demo dash with ease, that is, always horizontal and with no risk of accidentally dashing down. I won't go into the specifics on how this works, but as a result of this new button, speedrunners are now able to input the demo dash itself with little difficulty, hitting that resort skip again, again, and again. Demo dashes slowly started to appear throughout the speedrun as runners realized how simple it had become. Let's take a look at a few of the other, less rewarding demo dashes through spikes that probably wouldn't be feasible without using this new button. But what of the demo dashes that don't involve dashing through spikes? These applications are far more numerous, in both their variety and frequency of use. In the rest of this video, we take a look at 5 different categories of demo dashes that aren't used to dash through spikes. Category number 1, crouched hitbox demo dashes. While the crouched hitbox property is exactly what allows players to fit in between spikes, I'm going to make a distinction here by only discussing those demo dashes which don't dash through spikes, but still benefit from the reduced vertical hitbox. This can be extremely useful in simply going around obstacles. For example, players can squeeze underneath walls or under doors before they have opened fully. This can also be useful when dashing under a wall or under spikes if Madeline is already falling, by allowing the player to dash sooner. Sometimes, the shrinked hitbox property is useful for getting through tight obstacles, even when it's not required, such as when dashing through smaller vertical openings in Core and in Farewell. Let's see a few other notable applications of the crouched hitbox. Note again that in some of those examples, it is not required or even faster to demo dash to avoid the upper spikes. But demo dashing makes it much easier by giving the player a larger window of time to dash through. Okay, let's move on to the next category. Now here's where things start to get really interesting. We can use a demo dash to set up a hyper dash while midair. But what is a hyper dash? When combining a dash with a jump, the player is given an amount of speed and height dependent on the direction of the dash. This is known as a super dash. When combining a horizontal dash with a jump, the player gains a moderate amount of horizontal speed and a good deal of height. And this is a hyper dash. Unlike the super dash, the player gains more horizontal speed than vertical height when jumping. Hyperdashes are used very frequently throughout speedruns, since they allow Madeline to travel quickly over horizontal distances. They are done by jumping when Madeline is dashing in a crouch state. Sound familiar? Players most often will enter this dashing and crouch state by dashing down diagonal, but as you may have guessed, a demo dash can accomplish the same thing. But what's the advantage to using a demo dash to set up for a hyper dash? Let's assume for a moment that we couldn't demo dash. When Madeline is midair and the ground is directly to her side, a hyper dash isn't possible since a downright dash here would put the player into the floor. Sure, the player could still do a super dash by dashing right, but this would award much less horizontal speed, and we can do better. If a demo dash is used here, the player gets the benefit of the horizontal dash as well as a hyper dash when jumping. This is because the crouch state given from the demo dash converts the jump to a hyper dash instead of a super dash. There are so many interesting applications of this particular demo dash property in the Celeste speedrun that I couldn't possibly show them all. But here are some of the most significant and generally satisfying midair hyper setups that come to mind. During the duration of a dash, a horizontal dash allows the player to cover a greater horizontal distance than does a diagonal dash. While Madeline's dash remains the same speed and distance, because it is not fully focused horizontally, a lesser horizontal space is traveled. Interestingly, the same property also applies to dashes that begin when the player is on the ground, even though such a dash sends the player horizontally only, since there's ground below. So, what does this have to do with a demo dash? Because a demo dash is a horizontal dash, speedrunners can gain the benefit of this additional horizontal speed along the ground while still maintaining a crouch state. Why is this useful? As we have seen, demo dashing can be used to do a hyperdash, since it puts the player into a crouch state. But what of extended hyperdashes, which slide along the ground for a bit before jumping? An extended hyperdash is a variation on the hyperdash, which gives Madeline back her dash after the jump. Because extended hyperdashing requires the player to delay their jump, more time is spent dashing along the ground, and we can use that time to cover more horizontal distance by demo dashing. While it may seem that demo dashing would thus be the preferred method for performing all extended hypers, since, it goes even faster horizontally, this is not the case. Extended hypers grant the player with a dash refresh only if the player spends enough time on the ground before jumping. And if the player's dash along the ground is fast, there may not be enough ground available to spend that required time on the ground to actually get that dash refresh. So for that reason, this has limited applications, given that in many places it either isn't possible or just adds substantial risk for low reward. However, sometimes speedrunners don't need an extended hyperdash. They only need a regular hyperdash. Under such conditions, there is no worry of not having enough time spent on the floor to gain a dash refresh because the player doesn't need it. In practice, such applications are few, but very useful. These demo dashes are often used in Core, Chapter 8, because that level by design prevents players from getting a dash refresh from the ground. Perhaps though the most notable advantage speedrunners are able to gain from this property is when jumping off of ledges. When the player falls off of a platform, if the player jumps within 5 frames, they will be able to jump as if they were still on the ground. These 5 frames are referred to as coyote frames and are commonly used, often unintentionally. No matter how fast the player is moving, they get 5 frames of leniency to jump after falling from the ledge. There are a few extreme cases where the player needs to gain the maximum benefit from coyote frames in order to land where they want. Because coyote frames come with a time constraint rather than a distance constraint, the faster speed from a demo dash along the floor is instrumental in executing the more precise coyote hyperdashes. Players are able to cover a slightly greater horizontal distance before their jump, which can be a real game changer for where they land after the jump. Here are a couple of my favorites which I use in my speedruns. So far, our discussion has been limited to demo dashes that move the player horizontally. But what if demo dashes could also be used diagonally, and would this even be useful? Indeed, demo dashes can be done diagonally, but not quite in the same way. Players typically bind an additional button, known as a diagonal demo dash button. This button is conceptually similar to the regular demo dash button I mentioned earlier, except players must release this button within 5 frames after pressing it. Now, I won't go into specifics as to why this is the case, but this property of the diagonal demo dash makes it very tricky to execute. If the player holds down the diagonal demo dash button for too long, they will end up dashing down diagonal instead of up, which most of the time will result in death or otherwise unsavory time loss. For this reason, diagonal demo dashes are often used only in the highest level of speedruns, because they require a lot of practice and confidence to input correctly. Anyway, let's see what we can use diagonal demo dashes for. A diagonal demo dash has the same crouching property as normal demo dashes, except the player is dashing up diagonal instead of horizontally. Note that diagonal demo dashes do not apply to a down diagonal dash, since down dashes are always crouched anyway. This is used primarily to increase the window of time when jumping underneath a ledge, such as this one. Oftentimes, diagonal demo dashes aren't required to execute such a jump, but serve to make it much more consistent. Take for example the auto-scroller block skip in Golden Ridge. Without using a diagonal demo dash here, the player has a 2-frame window to dash in order to correctly set up for the jump underneath the corner. Celeste runs at 60 frames per second, so that is approximately 34 milliseconds of reaction time, which is doable, but we can make this a little easier. If a diagonal demo dash is used instead, this 2-frame window becomes a 4-frame window, making the trick far more consistent and reliable in a full game speedrun. The increase in leniency is due to the player being able to get closer to the ceiling. Notice that the player actually starts to fall slightly before being able to jump off of the corner. Since a diagonal demo dash makes the player crouched, Madeline has extra room to fall a tiny bit and still be able to jump off of the wall. If a normal dash were used here, the player won't be as close to the ceiling and won't have that extra time to fall. Okay, let's see this in action some more. Last but definitely not least is Archie. If the player enters a bubble while in a crouch state, the bubble will move upwards by 2 pixels. While demo dashing isn't a requirement to execute Archie, Archie is often paired with a demo dash due to it requiring the player to be crouched. This is very useful in several spots, as it allows speedrunners to move these bubbles to unintended positions and give Madeline that extra nudge needed to make some tricks possible. Here are some screens where the Archie strat is used together with a demo dash. As we have seen, demo dashing is used for much more than dashing through spikes, allowing for many small optimizations throughout the run. While each optimization is not much on its own, it is small time saves like these that continue to drive the Celeste speedrun world records to new lows. So next time you watch a Celeste speedrun, see how many demo dashes you can spot.